How do you stop 300 tanks and thousands of soldiers advancing like a steel tide? Is it possible to halt a two-pronged armored encirclement with fewer guns and less armor? Ukraine answered that question outside Sumy, and the answer didn't involve frontal clashes. It involved a digital fortress where drones, electronic jamming, and real-time targeting worked like a net around Russia's mightiest assault. But if everything depended on data, what happened when one drone lost its link and the entire system went blind for 12 minutes? Let's walk into that moment. Before we move on, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel and like the video. What happens when 10,000 troops and 300 tanks charge forward expecting to crush everything in their path, only to meet a defense built from signals, screens, and drones? That was the question in Sumy when Russia launched Operation Steel Fist, a huge attempt to trap Ukrainian forces with 2 armored pincers. The plan was built on mass T90M tanks, the most modern vehicles in Russia's arsenal, pushed at the front with BMP3 carriers right behind them, filled with mechanized infantry prepared to pour through breaches. It was the kind of force designed for a breakout on the flat battlefields of the last century, where armor columns could overwhelm with sheer firepower before defenders had time to react. On paper, it was overwhelming. Steel against earthworks, firepower against fragile defenses. Ukrainian commanders looked at that formation and saw only one outcome if they met it tank for tank: a slaughter. General Alexander Koval made the choice not to fight by Russia's playbook at all. He had no interest in dueling armor columns or trading artillery barrages head-on. Instead, he built something invisible: a spiderweb of sensors and signals stretched across the approaches to Sumy. The web was delicate, but in its strands lurked thousands of small hunters. This was not a medieval clash of shield against sword, but something altogether different: an attempt to make the battlefield itself hostile to any heavy vehicle that entered. The first layer of Ukraine's digital fortress floated high above the battlefield. Reconnaissance drones circled beyond the reach of most Russian guns, sending back constant video and thermal feeds. Every tank, every supply truck, every movement left a trace on those screens, like insects brushing a thread. Below them flew heavier drones, thicker-bodied machines capable of carrying payloads against Russian air defenses. These drones stalked radar units and missile launchers, trying to strip away the shield protecting the advancing steel fist. And at the bottom, right above the fields and trees, swarms of Komar FPV drones zipped forward, guided by operators wearing headsets. Each drone cost less than a cheap motorcycle, yet carried a tandem warhead able to punch through reactive armor. Their job was direct combat, hunting million-dollar machines one by one at low altitude. The economics told the story clearly. A T90M was worth over $4 million, but a Komar drone was under 1,000. If the drone knocked out even one target, the financial exchange alone turned Russia's advantage upside down. Added into this web were truck-mounted electronic warfare systems, jamming radios, navigation links, and reconnaissance drones. Together they created the Pavotina field, a bubble extending 15 kilometers across the front. Inside it, Russian crews lost directions and contact with command, making their armored tide not only visible, but confused and uncoordinated. Yet this fortress had one fragile truth: it only worked as long as every link fed the network with constant data. Lose a node, and the picture clouded over. Break the line for a moment, and the spiderweb sagged dangerously. The first warning came when Russian air defenses lit up, firing into the sky until an attack drone winked off the grid. That machine bore the call sign Viper 3, and when it vanished, a whole slice of the southern pincer disappeared from the Ukrainian view. It was only 12 minutes, but in a battle measured second by second, 12 minutes felt like an eternity. That brief silence was a glimpse of how quickly the net could unravel. Ukraine had rejected tank battles because the digital fortress turned every Russian vehicle into a target node, lit up in real time for artillery and drone strikes. But making armor visible was not the same as destroying it. And once electronic warfare struck back, the fortress itself began to tremble. What happens when the entire digital wall around an army collapses for less than a quarter hour? Outside Sumy, the answer came fast. Ukraine had been holding back Russia's biggest offensive with something called the Pavotina system, a 15-kilometer-wide jamming shield that blinded Russian optics and cut off radio traffic. Soldiers on the front called it the spider web because any armored vehicle entering the zone would feel like it had been caught by something it couldn't see. But even the strongest web has weak strands, and one of them snapped. The outage began when a drone known by its call sign Viper 3 vanished from operator screens. For 12 minutes, there was nothing but static in one section of the map. For drone crews used to a seamless flood of data, the silence felt suffocating. Whole blocks of Russian vehicles disappeared from tracking displays. Commanders had to imagine where armor had moved instead of knowing, and imagination in combat is a dangerous gap. Moscow's formation seized the moment. T90Ms and BMP3s pushed beyond the dead zone, their columns grinding through the breach at a faster pace than before. For the first time in days, Russian crews felt like the momentum was on their side. Ukrainian defenders saw it differently. With their screens partially blind, any delay risked more than lost ground. It threatened to unravel morale. A field observer near the southern approach lifted a flare gun and sent a green starburst cutting across the sky. That light was prearranged code for heavy artillery. Seconds later, crews of Caesar self-propelled howitzers scrambled. Within 90 seconds, shells screamed down at targeted coordinates estimated by scouts. The precision wasn't perfect, but the rolling blasts forced Russian armor to stall. That hesitation was the moment the network needed to knit itself back together. During those 12 minutes, panic could have spread. A mechanized advance of that size can overrun trench lines, clog escape routes, and slaughter unprepared infantry in minutes. Yet instead of folding, drone operators rebooted and rejoined the field one by one. Recon feeds returned. Nodes plugged the gap with fresh positioning data. In minutes, the net not only repaired, it reforged with sharper coordinates now focusing on the Russian spearhead that had dared to exploit the outage. With their location exposed again, the Russian columns became entries on targeting grids. Caesar batteries fired, then shifted positions in the shoot and scoot rhythm that spared them from counter-battery strikes. Ukrainian-built two S-22 Bodana howitzers joined in from further ranges. Guided by GPS and laser designators, their rounds struck with an error margin of less than 3 meters. Each impact flipped armor onto its side or cracked open turrets. No longer blunt barrages, the strikes acted like sniper fire delivered at 40 kilometers. Meanwhile, Komar FPV drones darted forward at treetop height. Operators wearing headsets pushed them against the flanks of tanks stalled by artillery craters. A hit on weak rear armor was enough to roast engines and stop movement cold. When gunners tried to hide under woodland cover, forward teams armed with American-made Javelin missiles emerged from the tree line, firing upward arcs that plunged through thinner roof plates. These three-man wolfpacks never stayed in one place long, moving quickly after each strike. Every Russian tank destroyed by a cheap drone or shoulder-fired missile shrank the steel tide into isolated pockets of burning vehicles. The message was clear. The net could stretch, snap, and yet rebuild itself around the intruder faster than the intruder could adapt. By the time Viper 3 reconnected, Russian commanders were already yelling into broken radios, trying to regroup formations that no longer existed. What began as a brief surge through a blind spot ended with entire units stranded in confusion. The digital fortress had done more than survive disruption. It had turned disruption into bait. And with the breach sealed, the real hammer was about to fall, not from tank armies, but from precision fire and small hunter teams waiting for direction. This wasn't a clash of tanks, it was a clash of systems. Ukraine didn't need to match armor with armor. The network itself beat the swarm, proving that coordinated data, jamming, and cheap drones could shatter steel worth billions. Every destroyed T-90 showed that victory no longer depends on raw firepower. When drones costing a fraction of a tank's optics dismantle entire units, the real advantage lies in who processes information fastest and keeps the battlefield connected. But if this digital fortress collapsed and rebuilt in seconds, what happens when autonomy grows and humans are no longer in the loop?